So breaking news, Andrew Yang has just dropped out of the 2020 presidential race. I'll show you the speech that he just gave, and then we'll discuss.
We do a Fox News alert. Andrew Yang dropping out. We're going to go to him live.
Evelyn and this campaign at every turn. Your passion and energy, your donations, and hundreds of thousands of hours calling, volunteering, your enthusiasm, dedication, and commitment. We've accomplished so much together. We have brought a message of humanity first and a vision of an economy and society that works for us and our families to millions of our fellow Americans. We went from a mailing list that started with just my Gmail contact list to receiving donations from over 400,000 people around the country and millions more who've supported this campaign. One of the things I'm most proud of, we gave $1,000 a month to 13 families around the country, including Jody Fassey right here in New Hampshire. We highlighted the real problems in our communities as our economy is being transformed before our eyes by technology and automation. And Americans know now that when you go to a factory in Michigan, you do not find wall-to-wall immigrants doing work. You find wall-to-wall robot arms and machines doing the work that people used to do. We stood on the debate stage and shifted our national conversation to include the fourth industrial revolution, a topic no one wanted to touch until we made it happen here with this campaign. Our signature proposal, universal basic income, has become part of the mainstream conversation. We increased the popular support for universal basic income to 66% of Democrats and 72% among voters 18 to 34. Without a doubt, we accelerated the eradication of poverty in our society by years, even generations. And that is thanks to all of you who are
Andrew
here tonight.
Yang dropping out. Two things you could say about Andrew Yang, whatever you think of his views. Good guy, personally, and a serious person, talking about things that actually matter and will matter 20 years from now, unlike so many running.
That was a very interesting campaign that Andrew Yang ran. I mean, very unique. And it's not just about the UBI, it's also bringing light to the fourth industrial revolution, explaining to people that a lot of people voted for Trump out of panic because they lost their jobs in the manufacturing belt. So I'm going to get into my critiques in a second, but just to highlight the positives of his campaign. I mean, the guy really shifted the whole conversation in the Democratic Party, at least in regards to UBI, because if you guys remember, before Andrew Yang came along, nobody was talking about universal basic income. Not even Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders is the most progressive one in the bunch. So that's something really remarkable. And, you know, universal basic income, in my opinion, that's something that's going to come about in almost every society at one point or another in the future. Who knows when, but it's coming. It's coming. It's inevitable. And so just by bringing it up, he effectively forced the majority of the candidates to actually take a position on it, to say, like, I support UBI or I don't support UBI. So it wasn't just limited to himself. Action on climate change, he's there. Now, if you want to get into the critiques, a lot of people were behind Andrew Yang because he supports Medicare for all. But, you know, when he was on the campaign trail, he would say things like he doesn't believe in banning private insurance. Now, if you look at page 8 of the Medicare for all bill, which was written by Bernie Sanders, you have to ban private insurance, duplicative care. So that's a bit of a contradiction right there. I mean, you can't have Medicare for all if you don't ban private insurance, at least not in Bernie Sanders' way. So if you're going to use that name, you need to be clear on the difference. And most people didn't understand that. When I had that conversation with them, they didn't know that there's a distinction there. So that's one thing, but that's not even the biggest critique. I mean, me personally, my biggest issue with Yang was what he said about Julian Assange, because he was saying that he was asked if Julian Assange should stand trial, and he said yes.
Do you support Julian Assange?
I think Julian Assange should stand trial.
And to me, that's a mind-boggling thing. I mean, for two reasons. Because without publications like WikiLeaks, you don't have anyone presenting an anti-imperialist challenge. You just don't. One of the most important things, I mean, the reason why WikiLeaks became famous was that video about Collateral, where you see war crimes taking place in Iraq. And you need publications like that to let the public know, to let people be aware of what's going on in these wars. And second of all, Julian Assange has never been to the United States. So how are you going to charge someone for a crime in your country when he's never been to your country? I mean, that's dystopian. So me personally, I can't be on board with that. I just can't. And it's not just about, Bernie Sanders, he actually proposed whistleblower protections. That's one of his plans in this race. And that's a really great thing. But even before he had proposed that, I was still shocked by what Yang said in regards to Julian Assange. So that's one thing. But if you look at the movement itself, okay, the whole math, the whole Yang gang, it's remarkable. You have to consider that Andrew Yang was completely unknown when this primary started, right? I had never heard of him. I'm pretty sure all of you had also never heard of him. So the dude comes out of nowhere and he builds a huge fundraising machine, and really pretty well. Like second quarter of 2019, I think he raised 2 million. Then the third quarter, it went up to 10 million. And then in the last quarter, 16 million. That's pretty remarkable. Okay. Whatever you want to say, that's still considerable achievement. And the question now they have to ask is why did he drop out? Well, if you look at what happened in Iowa, at the end of the day, he emerged with no delegates. The whole thing was rigged regardless. This whole thing with Pete Buttigieg paying the developers of Shadow. I did a whole video on that. But if he were still in the race, he'd be going to the national convention in Milwaukee with no delegates from Iowa. And what I think happened, since you have the New Hampshire primary today, is he's probably looking at internal numbers. He's looking at polling and realizing that he's also going to emerge with no delegates from New Hampshire. And so effectively, the scale is tipped in the other way now. It's becoming unproductive and a waste of money to keep running the campaign. It's just unsustainable because he fired also dozens of staffers after Iowa 5 days ago. So that's usually a sign that the end is coming, just like we saw with Kamala Harris when she was laying off a bunch of staff. You kind of know the campaign is in trouble when they do that. So I think the fact that he's not done well in the first two early primary states, that's the main reason. And the second thing, you have to ask yourself, where is his base of support going to go now? I think Bernie Sanders. If you look at the data of who makes up Yang's base, Andrew Yang's base, it's mainly young people, and their second choice is often Bernie Sanders. So you look at this voter data from Morning Consult, they say that 8% of Sanders supporters picked Yang as their second choice, while a whopping 33% of Yang's backers said Sanders was their backup option. Okay? And if you look at the age also, the overlap, and you see Andrew Yang and Bernie Sanders, they both have a huge chunk of voters between 18 to 44 years old. All right? Almost neck and neck. So I think the majority of Andrew Yang's base will go to Bernie Sanders in the coming primaries. You even saw in the Iowa caucus that in places in precincts where Andrew Yang didn't meet the 15% threshold and it goes to the second round, you had some of his supporters just going over to Bernie and being met with a round of applause. So I think that's what's going to happen. At least that's what the data says. Now, is this going to be enough for Bernie to win? No, it's not, because he has the whole political establishment against him. Just having some or all of Yang's support is not going to be enough just yet. But anyway, I think Yang ran a pretty good campaign, even though I don't agree with everything. And I felt some things were being misrepresented, like the Medicare for All thing. He said Medicare for All, but what he actually meant was a public option. So those are my critiques, but I'm very open and honest about them, and even though you're still going to have people who rightfully argue that Andrew Yang's policies and everyone else's just don't go far enough in tackling the root causes of poverty, of wealth inequality, like Bernie Sanders does. Okay, so Bernie Sanders is, instead of just giving you a universal basic income, he wants to tackle the reason you don't have the income in the first place. He wants to tackle the issues from the root cause. That's a contrast that a lot of people have been drawing, and I can understand it because it is quite valid. As far as systemic reform goes, as far as overhauling the system goes, I don't think anyone goes as far as Bernie Sanders. If you actually want to compare him to the rest of the field, I mean, this guy is light years ahead of Amy Klobuchar or, you know, Joe Biden. So we have to give him credit. We can't lump everyone into one basket because they're not all the same. Okay, I mean, you have Pete Buttigieg right at the bottom with Klobuchar and Biden, and Yang is. It's not fair to put Andrew Yang down there with those people. It's just not. You know, we got to give him credit. So there you go. This is just breaking news, just happened within this hour, and I hope I'm the first to tell you. So yeah. Anyway, remember to hit the like button so more people see it, and if you can support the show on Patreon or PayPal, I'd really appreciate it. We're just a small progressive channel starting out, so thank you so much.